Hello and welcome to Journeys and Journals. I get to talk history with people who've lived it, people who can tell firsthand the stories about the way it was. My guest today is Betty, who, well, you were there out in rural America when it was nothing but. What was the fields like around you, Betty?
Alfalfa fields. There was all kinds of hop yards when I was little. And we lived on a farm 5 miles out before you got to Hunt Lane.
5 miles out of Grants Pass and
On
the road.
Lower River Road.
Now, the Lower River Road just meanders down the river, obviously. But sometimes the river comes up, and what happens to Lower River Road?
Oh, well, it gets covered now and then. But what you were wondering about, that I said, you don't hear anything about the flood of 24.
And you have firsthand, well, secondhand information about the flood of 24. Tell us the story.
Secondhand information.
Your family lived right there on the banks of the river.
Right on the banks of the river.
High side. I mean, you were out of danger, right?
Well, the house was for a time, but the flood of 24 in December, it washed out our barn.
Oh, my.
And the barn went out. I don't know how many days later they decided they had to get out of there because the house might go. So there was a big swale between where our house sat and the Lower River Road. So on January the 1st, New Year's Day of 1925, they floated out on a hay rack with the horses swimming, Daddy driving. I was the sixth kid. So there was 5 kids on the hay rack, and Mother was about to deliver me. And she said they were going up to what it was Eisman Hop Yard. Mother and Daddy's aunt and uncle lived there. They were going up there.
Because that's higher ground?
Higher ground.
And they'd be safe.
Yeah. And so that's up where the Upper and Lower River Road come together. And they'd be safe up there. But she said, I thought I would die of embarrassment because I knew that aunt would bring in those 3 grown boys to watch if you came along.
Because Mom was pregnant?
Yeah, very much pregnant. And I was born 2 weeks later.
Oh, that's 9 months almost pregnant. And she was so, that was her one concern, not about the barn being lost, not about what might be happening to the house.
But if those boys watched that birth of that baby, is what she was embarrassed about.
Now, I was lucky enough because Betty took me to that very spot where that barn used to be and the house used to be, right?
Well, yeah, we were there. I don't know exactly where the barn sat from where the house is now.
And it's high and dry. This property, I mean, you wouldn't even imagine that the flood waters would ever get up that high. It must have been terrifying. You have a little piece of paper that tells just how terrifying it was. It's the floodwaters came many times to the Rogue Valley.
Oh, yeah.
And you had,
after that, you know.
And the worst floods were before there were roads, probably.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well, it lists an 18 and 60 something.
Oh, well, I don't know about that.
That was a big, bad flood. And now we think 64 was bad or 55 was bad, but the one that you're talking about was even worse.
Well, I don't know if it was worse or it just got our barn. And they had to float out.
Were wagons and horses, you're talking 19 and what?
1924, 25.
And
we had a Model T.
Oh, but they must not have thought it could get through
Oh,
the
no.
water.
No, the horses had to swim and drag the hay rack because there was 5 kids sitting there, and they probably took clothes and stuff for a few days, I imagine. And so,
Now, are these the kids you're talking about?
yeah,
Tell me, who is this?
well, that's my father with the Model T. We were probably getting ready to go to church. My older sister, Mabel, I'm standing there on the running board, probably 8 months old, 6 months old. My sister Beulah, a sister Opal, a brother Lyle, and my brother Bud is standing up on the running board of the car.
And the family name is?
Holmes, Holmes.
So folks around these parts might just remember the Holmes, but you are the tiniest little kid here.
Yeah.
And there's more kids besides?
6 years later, there was another sister and a brother.
Well, now, how in the world did your family get through the Depression and those hard times?
You raised what you ate and did the best you could, I guess.
Cows and sheep, or what did you have?
We had cows. We milked cows. I can remember in high school of milking 3 cows. I only had 3 to milk. Daddy took pity on me because I had to get dressed and get to the bus to get to high school.
Because
So
you didn't milk in your school clothes.
Oh, no. And so I only had 3 to milk night and morning. And so that was the thing that I don't know how many he milked, but
No milking machine?
now you're getting into something else. Somebody asked me when my dad bought a milking machine, and I said when I graduated from high school and he knew my younger sister would dry the cows up because she was such a small child. I mean, she was just, when she graduated from high school, she wore a size 2. And
she couldn't do the milking like
Yeah.
you'd done, huh?
so he bought a milking machine. And when that was in 43 that I graduated
Now,
from high school.
where did you sell the milk, or what was the?
Well, they separated and they sold the cream to a creamery here in town. I don't know where it was.
How did the cream get to the creamery?
Somebody came and picked it up.
One of those big milk trucks with the
Well,
clinking
no,
cans?
you put it into I think they were 10-gallon.
Milk.
Yeah, and took it down to the road and once a week or twice a week, I don't know how often. And this truck came by and picked it up.
Now, do you keep enough cream to have ice cream now and then?
Oh
or-
yes, oh yes. One summer we had ice cream practically every night because Daddy got a job working at the ice house.
Oh.
And so they were selling something, they were packing something. And so they threw out ice every evening, and he would bring home a hunk of ice, and we would have ice cream, you know.
This kind?
This kind. Us kids had to do it until it got so hard we couldn't turn it, and then you usually sat on top of the freezer on a burlap
Gunny
bag,
sack? Okay.
just to hold it down while he turned it some more, and then they would leave it till, you know, for a while to
Harden up. And
harden up. Yeah.
Now-
And so we then when like I said the other day, I was just 4 or 5 years old when we moved across the road and crossed the Lower River Road, and we lived there, well, the rest of my life. The folks, I don't know, let's see, Daddy died in 88. So it probably was the later 70s or the 80s that they sold the farm and moved into town. And
what did they raise on the new farm?
Well, we had 22 acres, so maybe 5 acres was in hay, maybe 5 acres was in potatoes, 2 acres in corn. There would be a pasture for the horses and the cows, and so you put the hay in the barn, of course, for winter, and we sold potatoes to people in town. They come out. Somebody was telling me just the other day. They said, I can remember going out and buying 100 pounds of potatoes to last the winter. And of course, there was Mac's Market was before Bird's Market, and Daddy used to sell them potatoes. And
Local produce was really part of our diet.
oh, well, yeah.
And all of Southern Oregon. I mean, you didn't have stuff shipped in from California, from
No.
Salinas Valley all the time.
My uncle got to trucking vegetables and stuff up here. And somebody laughed at me one night because I said, well, I don't want that broccoli. And they said, well, don't you like vegetables? I said, sure. Peas, corn, string beans, anything that we raised, but I never saw broccoli till I was grown. And this uncle brought this up, and he'd bring us this, whatever you call a thing of broccoli. And the same with eggplant. And he told us how to cook it, and Mother did, and she says, well, don't bring any more. Don't want that slimy stuff.
But corn, School. What about your school days? You brought this picture. Where is this taken? And
well, that's the Fort Vanoy School, and that was when it was 2 rooms. The first 4 grades was in one room, the upper 4 grades in the other room. And when I went out there with the SMART program, they said, well, what building did you go to? And I said, well, these buildings weren't here. And all it was 8 rooms. There was a basement in it where there was a big furnace, and one of the kids built a fire in this furnace and kept it going with wood during the day. And our main sport was, he's showing you something, the main sport was baseball. We played baseball.
girls and boys.
Well, if you had enough kids in the school to have an all-boys team, that's what you had. But we didn't have enough boys in the school that there was 2 girls on the team.
Were you playing work up?
No,
You had 2 teams?
No. Well, we might have played work up to practice, but then we played Dimmick and Jones Creek and Jerome Prairie and...
So girls played on the team out of necessity. Were you the girl?
I was one of the girls.
And what was your position?
I played third base.
And a good third base.
Well, I don't know, but we took the championship that year. And
I'm proud of. What grade were you in?
the 8th grade that year, 39. And one of the fellows that from Dimmick, he said, oh, you guys didn't win. I said, well, we certainly did. And he says, no, we beat you. I said, maybe before us girls got on.
Oh, got him there, didn't you? You got stories. Here's the old bathhouse. Few old cars here.
Well, that's the kind of car you had when that bathhouse was there.
That's state of the art, isn't it?
Right. And the caveman bridge with the round top.
Did you swim here?
Yeah.
At the river?
Sure.
I mean, there were no pools.
There was no pools, and there was a big slide. I never got brave enough to go down that slide, but you could go down to the edge of the thing and dog paddle out to that log.
Did you ever try to climb up on that log?
Oh, yes. and it kept turning, and so you might try it, but I usually went in head first on the other side.
And that was sort of a game that the big boys would try to
Well, no, usually
run the other ones into the water.
probably if you got a bunch of boys there, but at this time I probably was 10 years old, so if a bunch of kids was out there, there weren't any boys out there, you know. Then the high schoolers, of course, would get out there, and the big guys.
What fun this must have been to come down that slide. I just wished I could have that experience once. It'd be better than Disneyland, I'm betting.
Could be.
Tell me your favorite story about Mom. I always love to hear about how did she do this? 8 children, cooking and cleaning and...
Well, it was just work to be done, so you did it. You didn't worry about the next day. You had this to do today, and then during haying season, if they were going to bale the hay, why you had 2 or 3 extra men to feed at lunchtime, because the neighbors usually came and helped do that. But
so then your dad would then go to help them?
yeah, if they baled, you know. Otherwise, why we put most of the hay in the barn, and
Just loose hay? I mean,
well,
not baled?
no, it was loose hay. You put it on a hay rack, took it up to the barn, and
Pitched it in?
well, no, you had a big fork that came down, and they'd step on it, and it would go down into the hay, and then somebody would, I used to have to drive the horse out to pull it up into the barn, and when it got into the barn, they'd yell, and they'd trip the thing, and then you'd let the horse come back in, and they would pull this out and put it back in the hay, load of hay.
So it's 1 horsepower.
That was, yeah. You had a team, you know, that pulled the wagon and everything while you were putting the hay up on it, because you shocked your hay.
Now, you might want to tell me what a shock is.
Well, a little stack of hay like this, maybe this big around, so that it could dry, and then after it sat in these shocks, then you would go along and pick them up and put it on the hay rack, and
A big standing bundle like we see in pictures now.
no, nothing was standing. It would just be, you just piled this up in a pile so that it could dry.
Now, what happens if it rains?
Well, then you have to leave it there. Maybe you have to go along and tear your shock apart and let it
Kind of fluff it up like
lay it out so that it could dry, and then you'll go back and shock it up again and put it in this little pile. And that way, why, when you went to pick it up on the hay rack, why, Daddy could stick his fork in it and kind of turn it over on the hay rack and come back and get another, you know.
Now, I've heard that kids used to jump in the hay.
Oh, well, yeah. What kid wouldn't?
What's it like?
Well, I don't know. You weren't, didn't do that too often because you knocked your leaves off and stuff. And of course, when you were feeding the cows for milk and stuff, and you had your horses to feed, and there was the pig pens for the pigs, and of course that's where the milk we fed to the pigs, and then the cream they sold to a cream factory. And we always had a herd of pigs, a litter. And so the milk went to the pigs, and the cream went to the cream factory. And I don't remember where it even was. It seems like it was up on 7th Street someplace, but I could be wrong there.
Ah, 7th and E. Well, I went in there one time and they put that big wooden paddle in the cheese and lifted it up and handed us some of it in my hand, and it was like chewing rubber. And I thought it was the neatest salty thing I'd ever had, and I still love cheese curds to this day. They're back in fashion.
That's it. I know that when Zotola's came, I think their cheese thing was up on 7th. But I don't know about this other where, that was before the Zotolas, so I don't know about that.
Well, you have stories about downriver. Did you ever swim in the river? Go across the river?
Well, when we got over to the farm where we lived, there was 3 or 4 bachelors lived together. And they were the Hobson boys. And so they would come and tell the folks that they were going to take the boat. There was a boat over there at that time, and I don't even know who lived there. Take the boat across the river. And so they would let us go with them because they were good swimmers. My folks didn't swim. Daddy said, I get in the water, my head goes down and my feet comes up. So he never went swimming with us kids, but they would take us across the river, and there was kind of a sand beach there. And these men would go in order to take their baths because there were no bath room in the house where they rented. And so they would go over there 2 or 3 times a week and take their baths in the summer. I don't know what they did in the winter. And so they would take us across there. And some Witt kids and the Holmes kids. And
these are your neighbors and your schoolmates, huh? From Fort
Sure.
Benoi?
Yeah. And so we'd go over and play on the in the sand and just in the river along the side, because we couldn't swim, but we could go play in the water,
Now, have you learned to swim now?
Well, I probably couldn't now, but I did. When we lived in Vegas, we had a pool, and the kids, don't touch Mom. She don't want her head wet. Just leave her alone. Don't jump on her back.
Well, you're telling me that you left Southern Oregon.
I married a fellow from First National Bank, and we were transferred. We was in Coos Bay when the son was born, and then we went to First National in Nevada. So we was in Reno a while, and then we were in Las Vegas for about 8 years, I think.
But here you are, back home again.
Yep. Things change, and we separated, and I came back here in '69 with the 2 kids. And Jackie graduated from high school, and she's now the fairgrounds manager.
Oh.
The Jackie McBee that you see all the time. Well, they should do something to that fairgrounds to earn more money and all this jazz,
And that's your little girl, and your son is?
My son works for Delta Airlines out of Salt Lake. And
does that mean you get to go flying a bunch?
Well, it is. I mean, he can get me passes, but they're gone most of the time, so they aren't home. So, because he and his wife both are flight attendants. So, so that was.
Well, what brought you back to Southern Oregon? What was the draw?
Well, I grew up here.
Home, huh?
Yeah, home. And I didn't want to raise 2 kids in the LA area by myself, so why not go back to Grants Pass?
It's a good place.
Right. And so I came back and went to work for Southern Oregon State Bank. And I was there till '88. And then I went out to Moser Paving for 16 years. I thought, I'll go out there for a couple years, and then I'll be 65. Well, I worked till I was 80. And
You're past 80 now?
well, yeah.
Okay. Well, you give me courage. I'm about 11 years behind you, so it's not going to be so. You're just doing lots of things nowadays. You don't sit around and wait for anything, do you?
Well, I try not to.
What's your favorite?
I think napping.
Oh. Did I wake you? So sorry. Do you think that you'll be down in the river anytime soon playing around?
No.
Were there restrictions about girls being in those skimpy swimsuits down there?
Well, they weren't very skimpy at that time.
Well, I see legs.
Well, yeah, they had legs. We were out watching the
Boatneck
Boatneck yesterday, and I said to a fellow that was there with our little group, and I says, "Oh, look, there goes look at that bikini." And he looked. She was about 5 years old. He says, "I'd rather look at it when 20 years from now."
Uh-oh. We're about out of time, but I sure want to thank you, Betty. When people tell me you ought to talk to my friend, and if I'm real lucky, pick up the phone and I find somebody like you that says, sure, I'd love to come. If you get more pictures and more things to tell us about your family, I'd love to have you back again.
Okay.
We're out of time, and I want to thank you for tuning in and thank Betty for being here with us. I'm Bernie Martin Beck, and I just love to hear the stories of people way back when. And here we are now, the luckiest people in the world. Thanks for tuning in.